This is the Andres Segovia Show.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Andres Segovia Show. I'm your host, Andres Segovia. On this episode, I have numerous updates with respect to what's happening on the fight for your property rights here in California, and a warning to the rest of you throughout the country, because where goes California, so goes the rest of the country. And that couldn't be more true than now, especially when a lot of Californians have mass migrated out of here onto other states, particularly like Texas and Florida. That's not to say that there aren't things that were already in motion in those states that affect your property rights. But just to give you an example, in California, we have, depending on who says it, they'll tell you that it's statewide rent control. To be more specific, we have a statewide rent cap. A statewide rent cap means that you cannot raise the rent above a certain limit. Now, that could essentially mean rent control. So I feel that the term is used loosely. But to be more specific, there are certain areas in the state, such as they could be municipalities or counties, that have what is called a rent stabilization ordinance, or RSO. Rent control, at its essence, means to control your property. So these are basically Marxist policies that are meant to strip the property owners of ownership of their own property, quite literally. It's in the descriptions of the powers of the housing department in Los Angeles on what they intend to do if you do not comply with everything that they demand that you comply with. On top of that, there's always constantly being added to that what is called more renters or tenants' rights. On top of that, to make it more difficult for property owners. There was recent talk, this is not on my notes, but I remember this, that because I was part of this call, by the way, a couple of weeks ago. This was an update I was meant to give to you, but I ended up getting locked out of Instagram, so I talked about that in the previous episode instead. So I'm going to be imparting some of the information I meant to get out to you on this one, including this. I was part of a webinar meeting with the city of Los Angeles, and it was supposed to be a meeting for property owners and tenants. But the whole thing was just talking about the tenants' rights and how they can stick it to the property owners. So I'm like, okay, so this is a very hostile environment. What benefits are there for us? Well, no, there aren't any. But one of the scariest things that was being told there, because in the state of California, it's a two-party state. You cannot record somebody else without their consent. The city of Los Angeles was illegally telling their property, the tenants, on how they can record their property owners, and use that as a way to say it's harassment, and then turn the case against the property owner so they can get out of paying their rent. That's not going to hold up in court. At least it shouldn't. And as far as I know, they were trying to get that at the statewide level, and that was rejected. At least I hope it remains that way. I recommend that you bookmark my website. That's right here, www.segovia.com. That's where all the show notes are going to be. And if you want access quicker to these show notes, you can install the Progressive Web app, my website. You can download. And for those of you on iOS 16.4, you can do the same. And you can get push notifications if you hit the bell. They're on the website, so you don't miss out on any of the updates, because there's quite a few things that are here that you need to expand on your own to get more information out there. So one of the first articles that I have here is from one of the associations that I want to give a shout out to, and I'm going to give a shout out to several more. The first one is the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. So they kind of speak for themselves as to what area they're servicing. There are other apartment associations that I want to highlight, and one of them is coming up, but ones that I don't cover today would be the AOA USA. So AOAUSA.com is where you can go check out their stuff. They're the largest apartments or association here in California. Dennis Block, one of the most famous eviction attorneys in the state, he ended up going on the AOA and imparting basically that eviction stuff that I learned the previous day over on the AOA site. So that's on YouTube. I'll be leaving a link to that episode in the show notes accompanies episode at www.segovia.com. With respects to the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, they have filed a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. They are demanding that housing providers, well, this is what the summary of the lawsuit. Housing providers file petition for writ of mandate and complaint for declaratory relief, seeking a preliminary injunction and temporary restraining order prohibiting the city of Los Angeles enforcement of illegal so-called renter protection ordinances. The state laws or the state emergency order has officially expired. In the case of Los Angeles, King Garcetti said that they will expire in Los Angeles too, 1 year after it expires, or at that Governor Newsom has declared that it was over. So in other words, it was going to expire sometime in February 2024. Under a lot of political pressure, that was no longer going to be the case. You were going to expire at the same time that California was, but then they kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Officially, it's expired in Los Angeles, but they were trying to hold on to the Tenant Protections Act and making them permanent. So that's what's being challenged here, particularly the just cause eviction part of it. That basically just gives all the authority to the tenants. On top of that, with the whole talk about like, oh, here's how you can record your property owners and use it against them in court. Like the property owner can't use that against the tenants in court. Why is it going to be the other way around? Well, we do have a lot of tenant activist organizations, including one called Basta out there that you should be aware of. They're making a lot of moves, especially in trying to get attorneys pro bono for the tenants, but paid for by you, the property owner, to be used against you. And it looks like they might have their way. I can't speak into any more of that, but if I do have an attorney that we've been in talks that he might be on my show to talk about this as more information comes to light, then make sure you like, share, subscribe, stay in the know, and you will be in the know when I have him on the program. All right, next. This one's pretty big. Oh, I meant to say that a couple of other associations. One of them is AAOC. They are the Apartment Association of Orange County. A couple of the guys were on my program. They recently had their big event in Costa Mesa. So these associations are active, and if you're a property owner looking to have rental property owners, you should be looking into local associations. But more importantly, as some wisdom that was passed on to me by attorney Mike Brennan said, get to know your fellow property owners. Like if you're just own a home and someone else owns a home, talk to them, because you all need to organize to go against this onslaught of anti-property or just outright theft of our property and stripping of our property rights here in the state of California. Because like I said, where California goes, so goes the rest of the country. And believe me, they're coming after way more than what's going on here. But we have this Proposition 19, and I can't recap the whole thing. Oh my goodness, that's like hours worth of stuff that I can go over. But it just to put it in a nutshell, Proposition 19 was disguised as supposedly a relief for people that lost their properties in the fires and also support firefighters. That was supposed to be a small percentage of what Proposition 19 actually was. What it did was it eliminated generational wealth transfer. In other words, a parent or a grandparent, once deceased, and they pass on their property to the next of kin, that was not supposed to be tax reassessed because it's not a sale. That is now gone. Several propositions were eliminated with that, whereas now the property, even though it's not being sold, passed on to the next of kin, must be reassessed at current value. We're talking about property that could be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and it's getting taxed off the wazoo. So it's elimination of generational wealth, along with the AB 1482 that installed the rent cap in the state of California. These were pushed by the California Association of Realtors. They were lobbying for these things, and they misrepresented Proposition 19 when they had someone from the Howard Jervis Taxpayers Association. What they didn't say was that person was kicked out. But they were using that to push this when the Howard Jervis Taxpayers Association was actively going against Proposition 19. But yeah, they won't tell you that part. So the CAR, that's their acronym, has been, if they're intending good, their good intentions are paving the road to economic hell. And I've called them out many, many times about this because they are disserving their clientele and their potential clientele by ruining the possibility of future renters being able to turn into property owners. They're basically ruining all of that. So I don't know what they're thinking and why they're allowing for this, and they won't even course correct, even though they admit their mistakes. But whatever. But we have some good news here because the Howard Jervis Taxpayers Associations, along with others, have been trying to get signatures to get an initiative on the ballot to put a proposition that will undo the harm caused by Proposition 19 from the death tax aspect of things while keeping some of the good things of it. But apparently, we have a bill that has been introduced to the California legislature. This is Senate Constitutional Amendment number 4, and the Howard Jervis called me, the Taxpayers Association called me to give me a heads up on this because I didn't know about this. I just knew that they were trying to collect signatures, but this one is a constitutional amendment introduced by Senator Sayarto and co-authored by Assembly Member Chen. And it's a resolution to propose a change on Proposition 19. So I already went through how the taxation was supposed to work out if there was a transfer. This is what they're saying that this would keep, because that's all gone. So much for living trust. My goodness. This measure, if passed, would end the operation of the provisions of Proposition 19 on January 1st, 2025. The measure would reinstate on January 1st, 2025, the prior rule excluding from classification as a purchase or exchange in ownership the purchase or transfer of a principal residence and the first $1 million of other real property in the case of a purchase or transfer between parents and their children, or between grandparents and their grandchildren if all the parents of the grandchildren are deceased. This measure will require the legislator to provide in statute that the above described changes are publicized, and to ensure that the publicity reaches minority communities, the measure will require a liberal interpretation and broad application of these changes that effectuates their purpose. So this is a good thing. I hope there's enough support, but it's on us to tell our local legislators, the ones that are representing us, like, hey, you better back this bill because we need it to be passed. And it's going to help greatly to restore the stuff that has been lost. Now, I don't know what that's going to do for those that already took action to get the tax benefits before that law was kicked in, Proposition 19. But hey, if we can right or wrong here, I hope that CAR, if you're watching this, you get behind this too. PWR over in Southern California, who I used to be a part of, I hope you're pushing this too. I will be reaching out to both of you individually after this episode goes up, and I'm going to be clipping this out for social media. So I hope all of you are watching this and sharing it with everybody you know, because we need to make noise to get our legislators, from the assembly members to the senators, to support this Senate Constitutional Amendment number 4. Okay. All righty. So move on to the next item, and this is one of 2 left. Okay. So this is like I said, it's a lot, and this is one of those that I need you to be aware of. Okay, so the anti-housing bill, a newly introduced bill, would overhaul the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, or AB 1482, by dramatically lowering the rent cap and applying the limit to previously exempt single-family homes. So they're coming after your properties. This is a coded way of saying they're trying to get rid of Costa-Hawkins. And like I said, rent control, as on its actual practice, is government takeover of private property. And if you don't think that this wouldn't come to you if you're living in a state that's not California or another blue state like New York or Oregon or Washington, yeah, like I said, where California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. If you're thinking BlackRock, yeah, that's probably one of them that's doing the bidding of a lot of these like socialist policies of this supposedly being equitable in the distribution of things, not really saying that they're destroying property values and property rights, and therefore our freedoms in the process. This is for 100% fed up. JP Morgan CEO recommends taking private land from Americans to accelerate green energy policies. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the U.S., is advocating for the forcible seizure of American land. In an annual shareholders letter, he advised that seizing private property might help the U.S. cope with the climate crisis. Folks, this episode can go off the rails so easily from here. So just know that if you do believe in, as he does, with the solutions for the climate crisis, that literally means just installation of socialism throughout the entire world. And believe me, taxing yourself into prosperity and taxing yourself into saving the environment has never worked, and it will not work. You're just giving more unfettered power to the government, which is what they want in the name of saving the world. Links to all these articles and more will be available at the show notes accompanying this episode of www.newsegovia.com. If I go any further, this episode is going to be censored. So if I share any expanded thoughts, it will be over on Locals. Locals.com is where I do the expanded episodes where applicable, where episodes that cannot make the public airways because it just won't make the rounds. It'll be throttled like some of my other episodes have been, especially on YouTube. So I recommend you go check out my stuff on Locals. Free to sign up. I don't have anything behind a paywall or anything, but if you decide to support, I really appreciate that. But more so than anything else, make sure you follow me across the socials at the Andre Segovia, on Twitter _Andre Segovia. I'm trying to keep you up to date as to what is down the pipeline in trying to take out your private property rights in this country. Let me just restate here on this episode, I've said it before on other ones, our rights begins at our home, our property. Okay? You own your property. You give that up. You've given up your Bill of Rights. Do not let the Marxists take over. We can still work to save California and fix California if enough of us wake up to all this. And I'm also speaking to you renters about this too, because the rent control works. Why hasn't it? Rent control was supposed to make rents go down. Rent control was supposed to keep the homeless off the streets because they weren't going to be homeless. So why do we have a record number of homeless and the record number of the highest rents in the places where there's rent control? Think about it, folks. If an experiment that's been going on for decades doesn't work, why are we going to put it everywhere else? And yes, I've done an episode about a federal rent control initiative because that's probably coming a lot sooner than later. Anyway, that's it for this episode of The Andre Segovia Show. Thank you so much for watching this latest episode. Remember to like, share, subscribe, to stay in the know, and you will be in the know. And I'll see you on the next one.